So our first speaker is Professor Morello. He's a CPA, a certified mortgage broker, and he's going to be talking about credit. And then our other speaker is Professor Ted Rosen, also a professor, and he's going to compliment our speaker. So,
hello, everybody. We're going to talk about credit reports today. Anybody know what a credit report is? Anybody ever seen their credit report before? Good. It seems like a few people. Anyway, does anybody know what the best score is on a credit report? About 850. Good. Good. If you have over 720 today, you'll have a very good score. I will show you a credit report in a little bit. Before I start talking about credit reports, I want you to all understand that this is very, very personal information. Number one, you do not give out your social security number to anybody unless, you shouldn't give it out for any reason whatsoever. Be very careful in those matters. The information I'm going to show you on this credit report, you'll be shocked at how much information. There are even more powerful credit reports. The one that I will show you is used when you purchase a home. Does everybody know that there are 3 credit repositories that report to the credit bureau? Okay, do you know who they are? TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. That's right. Those are the 3 credit repositories. So, in order to really know your credit, you cannot look at just one, because a vendor may report on Experian and not on Equifax. And when you go to buy a house, the lenders will require to look at all 3, and they take the middle score of the 3 of you individually. And if it's a married couple, they will take the lower middle score of the 2 parties. How is a credit score calculated? Anybody have an idea? I'm going to tell you, but obviously you have to pay your bills on time. So in order for you to protect yourself, it's important that if you have a credit card, that you at least pay the minimum balance on time. I've had situations where people said, oh, I was away and I forgot. Well, that will cause that blemish will reduce your credit score to such a level that sometimes it makes you get a higher interest rate or no loan at all today in this market. So you have to keep tabs on it. I have a PowerPoint, and if anybody wants the PowerPoint, if you give me your email address later, I will email it to you, and I have some other handouts that I didn't print. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump to that and try to stay on task, because I tend to not focus and go off on tangents, and then I lose all of you. So this is about understanding your credit report. The best way for me to do this is to actually show you a credit report. Now, what you see over here is from Equifax. That's the service that's used. And this person had 3 credit scores. As you can see there on the left, it's 637, 681, and 694. So the middle score is 681 is what I would use to do a loan. In today's market, this person would have a very difficult time getting a conventional loan. They would have, it would be a problem. And if you notice on the right, there's comments. There was 1 serious delinquency. Then it tells you the proportion of balance to credit limits is too high. That's a segue into the second item in calculating your score. The first item was paying on time. The second item, your used credit is the numerator divided by your available credit equals a proportion, a ratio, that is used to determine your score. So if you have less than 50% of your credit being used, of your available credit being used, that will help you a lot. If you've used 99% of your available credit, that will hurt you. So I'm going to say something. Very often people say to me, you know, I'm fixing my credit report, I'm paying off all my credit cards, and I'm closing them. That's not helping you. Anybody know why? Yes?
Long
No. The ratio is now worsened because you got rid of an available limit in the denominator by closing the line. So if you pay off your credit to zero, I would suggest that you don't close the line, because usually you have credit card limits with each credit card. Another trick is to call the credit card company if you're a very good customer and have the line increased, even though I would never use it. How many people are from my classes? What do I always tell you about credit? Pay it off every month. Don't utilize credit. If you can't afford it, you shouldn't be using it. In other words, I'm not saying don't use your credit card, but when you get the bill, pay it all off. Because the interest is not deductible on a credit card, and the interest is very high. You have to spend within your means. So then the other thing you need to understand is a budget, and that's for another time, but that's an important part of utilizing credit. The other item, you do need credit in order to establish your financial fingerprint, which is your credit report. You should have a credit card, and I'm not saying not to use it, but again, to pay off at all times. So let's continue on this credit report. So you saw the scores. A lot of court credit inquiries is not a good thing. So if you're going to look for a loan or money, every time you go to look, the lenders run your credit. Even when you go to buy car insurance, the insurance company looks at your credit, and that affects your premium, just so you know, on any kind of insurance, home, car, etc. So the way to avoid inquiries, like if a mortgage broker or a lender is going to run your credit, that will count as an inquiry. But everybody, according to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, has the right to get one free credit report every year. Where do you think you should go for that? Freecreditreport.com? No. That was a very smart business person that set that one up. The official site, according to the Federal Trade Commission, which you'll see some videos later, is annualcreditreport.com. Now, annualcreditreport.com, you have to run it with the three, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, will not give you a score. But it is your job to go through that once a year to make sure each item on the report is yours. And if it is not, you have to make inquiries. Call up the vendor, like let's say it's a Macy's or any store, you call up Macy's and you say what? And I'll show you how you can get that information a little bit later. We'll get back to that. Page 2 gives me a summary of your total debt. So this person right now has a real estate loan of $306,000 with a payment of $3,033 a month, and she was 2 times 30 days delinquent. Well, if you're late on your mortgage, lenders don't want to lend to you. At least a year has to be over 1 year old for them to look at it. Then she has installment loan. That would probably be a car loan of $8,800 with $339 a month. She has revolving credit card debt of $24,843 with $409 payment, and she was 7 times 30 days and 1 time 60 day. Then there's nothing, collections, nothing, other, $11,383. So she has 2 dates on her mortgage and 7, now I gotta look at it. So when we go down to credit report, now it gives you the details. And it says the lender, Washington Mutual, it's a mortgage. The period it was opened from August 2003 to July 07. This was done in 2007, I took an old one. And it shows you 48 months reviewed, and in this instance it's saying she was not delinquent. So the 2 delinquencies were from a long time ago. American Express has similarly information, $11,005 high credit and the balance $11,000, and she wasn't late. And it goes on and on. So you'll see, look, I know your shopping habits. Look, GE, Victoria's Secret, Macy's, Limited, I will see everything. on the credit report if I look at it. What I really wanted to show you now, I went from page, whatever, 3 or 4, and then I went right to the back, page 11, because the rest of the stuff was similar. And you'll see anybody in the public records, if there's any liens on her. There are none here, so the public records is none, so that's a good thing. Then it tells me who ran her credit and when they ran it, and the repository subscriber code. Then you look on the bottom, and it shows the address where this person lived throughout her life. And then it tells me where she worked, Victoria's Secret, and it tells her birth date, etc., and inquiries. And this is really what I wanted to show you. Everybody who reported on this person's credit report is listed there. So the very first one, you remember we saw Washington Mutual? There's her account number. If you want to reach Washington Mutual and question it, it shows you a P.O. Box number and a phone 800 phone number. Anytime you have issue and they don't have an 800 number, I strongly recommend you do a certified return receipt or some form of proof that you questioned your credit. Okay, I have a question for you. You have a cell phone with Sprint, and you decide to switch to Verizon. And then you get that last bill, because I've had this many times from younger people, that says you owe $18. And you say, look, I'm not dealing with Sprint anymore, and you chuck it to the side. Is that a good idea? No. They will ruin your credit because of that $18. Pay your bill. If you disagree with the bill, there's nothing wrong with you with calling up the company and saying, look, I canceled my phone. Why am I getting this bill? But do not discard it and disagree with it, because later on, 5 years later, that will show up. Very often when I run people's credit report, they say, what? I didn't know this. All the time. So please understand it's your financial fingerprint, and you do need to establish credit. Thank you. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about is when your credit is run, information is being sold to finance companies and insurance companies. And you have the right to opt out of this by going to optoutprescreen.com. And you can do this online. They say on the site that it doesn't help you credit, but my understanding is that this will help you credit. I've done this myself. So what I'd like to do is just get to that site if I could. Well, the best way to do that, I think, would be to go like, you have the choice to send them a letter, or you can just click here to opt in or out. See this electronic opt out for 5 years? You click on that, you submit, and you put your information in right here, and that will tell the credit companies that you've opted out from them selling your information. It's kind of like the do not call list, but this is for credit reporting. Optoutprescreen.com. If you give me your email address, I will also put that in for you to utilize if you don't, but I strongly recommend you to do that. And we already talked about annualcreditreport.com. Below are the 3 websites of the credit repositories. So if you have a question with TransUnion, you go directly to their site, and their phone numbers change very often. But I would strongly recommend you go to them. The best thing is to get on the phone with a person to get your credit fixed if there is a problem. Okay, we already talked about the pay history. We talked about the ratio of used credit to available credit. DTI, so you know, is debt to income ratio. This is a very important ratio in banking and underwriting a loan to approve you for a mortgage for a home or any kind of loan. And what it is they take your gross income as the denominator, and they take your total debt, all debt, as your numerator, and they look at the ratio. So naturally, if 60% of your income is being used to pay off debt, you're in a pretty bad situation, and you need my money if I were the bank. And we don't like that. We want somebody that doesn't have that, and they're just saying, look, I'm thinking of buying a co-op, let's say, or something, and they have usually 1 week's pay should equal your total debt, 25. They go as high as 33% ratio. 38% they'll go. But it's better if it's lower. So debt to total income ratio is DTI. The other item is the length of time your credit is in place. If you just got a credit card in the last 6 months, you really are not a good candidate for a loan. So you should have some sort of credit established. Car loan. I'm not saying to borrow to buy a car. Please don't say I said that. I'm just suggesting that you have to establish credit for 2 years for any bank to say, we have something to stand on that this person is a good credit risk. Or should I say, not a bad credit risk. We already talked about the number of credit inquiries. Then they look at the types of debt. Credit card debt, do you think that's good debt? No, it is not good debt. Interestingly, they do look at mortgage debt as good debt. And it is good debt for you for tax reasons and for credit report reasons, because the mortgage interest is tax deductible. I'm not saying to take the equity out of your house to buy a car. I am saying, though, if you're not in business for yourself and you have no other way of getting the deduction, you may want to use a home equity line to purchase the car and get that. That looks better on your credit report than an installment loan from the car company. Excuse me. I'm going to leave the statute of limitations for debt collectors for Professor Rosen to talk about a little later, so that's something that would be best for him. Just want to give you some horror stories. Medical bills. Very often, God forbid you have to go to the hospital. I find hospitals, health insurance companies to be the worst at sending bills to you. I would strongly urge you to be proactive if you had to deal with a hospital in making sure your debt is paid. Because very often, out of the blue, people say, yeah, I was in Florida, had to go to the emergency room, and it shows that you owe $10 to some bill. It's for something. For whatever reason, it happens, in my experience, and I'm doing this a long time, that something shows up that they knew they went to the hospital, but they didn't know they owed this money. So I strongly urge you to be proactive in that. I've had doctors say, yeah, I got that bill, and for the principal, I'm not paying it. Well, I said, that's okay, I understand that, but now I got to give you what's called a B credit loan, which means instead of getting you 5%, or at the time 5%, you're going to have to go to 6.5%. And we're talking about $10. So if you're going to deal with principal, it should be a lot of money. Okay, please take that advice strongly. And I already talked about the car insurance. What do I say the best investment? Well, what is the worst investment? Let's go there. Anybody know? Go ahead. Okay, that's the bad investment, because when you get the car, when you come out of the showroom, you lose a lot of value. There's one other investment worse. Boat. Yeah. Very good. Car and boat. What is the best investment?
House.
Yourself. Investing in yourself, people. A house is a very good investment. But investing in yourself is even better. I'll always bet on you. Yes, you can. College is a great investment. Education, too. Absolutely. The only thing, education, they give you, what is it, like $2,000 credit every year? And how much, well, the good news is you're here. You're about covered if you're paying for it yourself. But with the mortgage, it's all deductible, is really what I'm trying to say. Thank you. So we talked about paying off your debt and not closing the lines. Any errors you got to fix. I had a situation, my wife got a magazine, doesn't matter what it is, New Woman, and they said you owe us, whatever, $40 or whatever. I said, well, I called the company up and I said, could you provide me with the document that is subscription thing that I signed or my wife signed saying we ordered this? And they were unable to prove it. Now I had to do this certified return receipt, and then they did not. I said I would like a letter back that you're going to correct this and not hurt my credit report, and I have that here. And I have a whole file of all situations I personally had to deal with through the years. And I have letters in here from 1994 and 92. It's called credit cards. That every time I had a situation, I kept doing this. So again, it's important for you to keep, be anal retentive in protecting your service, because as Professor Rosen's going to talk about, identity theft is probably the biggest largest crime in America. It's growing very fast, and you need to watch. So I have faxes with confirmations and letters going on, and that I kept from going back 20 years. So your brother comes to you, and he says, I'm buying a car, and I'm having a hard time getting a loan. Will you co-sign for me?
No.
What should you do?
No.
Why shouldn't you do that?
Because what if you don't pay the bill?
Right, another experience I've had, people come to me, I'm buying a house, and they say, I look at their credit and I say, there's something here, or a house in North Carolina, that it's hurting your credit. Oh my gosh, I co-signed a loan for my brother 6 years ago. He never told me he's late on the mortgage. Well, I said, if you co-sign, guess what? You guaranteed the loan. So what happens? Don't do that, people. That person it's a very difficult situation. So I'm not a big fan of co-sign, and I'm not telling you not to do that. I just think when you do it, understand what you're getting into. Okay? For some reason, in the last 2 weeks, I've been getting a lot of calls from actually women in the process of getting divorced. And they're running their credit, and they're saying, look, her credit is ruined. She says, my ex-husband filed bankruptcy, and he's not paying this bill. It was a time, just yesterday I was talking to her. It was a timeshare, she said to me. And the timeshare says now it's current and whatever, and she has to deal with this, and she has nothing to do with it. She says, I have the divorce decree. It says he's responsible. These are things that, then I said, well, what did your attorney say? Oh, my attorney was horrible. I hear that all the time. He didn't do this, he didn't do that. I don't know. All I'm dealing with is a situation today where a person's telling me that they have a 630 credit score, and they're saying, I want to buy a co-op. And I'm saying, not today. So she has to deal with all this. The only thing I can say, I'm not a lawyer, is that often what I see attorneys do in divorce, because they contact me or the people they refer to me, is if the other party is responsible for the debt, especially in a mortgage, they have the party refinance and take the other party off the loan. So that if there is a default, because there is usually equity in splitting of assets. Let's say the husband kept his pension and the wife got the house. Well, the wife has to refinance the house to take the husband off, so that if she defaults on the house, the husband's not responsible. Well, vice versa. In this girl situation, that did not happen. And I can't help it. So I just want you, I'm not trying to talk about negative issues, but in credit reporting, sometimes these are things that I've seen in my experience that I thought I should share with you. Okay, I gave you that. And that's really everything I wanted to talk about. And did you have anything on this that I wanted to share with you on credit reporting? I just wanted to make sure I shared with you everything. That's pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes?
There's a situation.
You want to talk onto the mic? No.
You kept talking about the car insurance.
Car, yes.
So like what I experienced was recently, not too long ago, I bought a new car. So you want to get the best car. You want to see which bank is going to give you the best interest rate or what insurance.
Right, the lowest rate insurance.
Kind of have to shop around. So then we get in that, I guess, in the habit of, you know, everyone is running your credit because you want to know who's going to offer you the best. So how do you get out of that? One, and then two, after I bought the car, have the car, and the purchase, 3 months passed, I'm still getting letters in the mail. Hey, you got to prove for this, you know, loan from other banks. So to me, right now, I feel like, you know, the dealerships that I was going around and shopping at different dealerships are still.
Well, they all ran your
Right,
credit.
right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, they're not running it again.
No.
No, they shouldn't then. I can't speak for them, but in general, they did it then, and they're just trying to see, you know, if you fell off the mountain and it sales. Did everybody hear the question? No, okay. The young lady bought a car, and during the period when she bought the car, she was shopping, and everybody ran her credit and did all this stuff, and now she bought the car and picked one place, and she's still getting letters. It's a very good question, by the way. They usually give you a 45-day time period. So let's say you ran your credit today. For 45 days, in that period, if you run within that 45 days, the inquiries will not hit you at the same time. But they do know you're looking for money. So the effect it does have a deleterious effect, but it's not, I'll call it the law of diminishing returns. Like, it's less negative. But within 45 days, you can do as much. They realize people do shop, and they promote shopping, so they're not going to hurt you for that. I would tell you to contact all the other people that are still sending letters that I have received the car, and I've gotten a loan, and thank you, but no thanks. And try to do it in some form of writing so you have an audit trail, a paper trail, so that if anything is continued run, if you find out later on, you will know that. And the other thing you can do is go to annualcreditreport.com if you haven't done it in the last year, and look at the inquiry page that I showed you. Very good. Next, yes.
Okay, my home is in my dad's and my name. With all the programs that's going on now, I'm trying to lower the interest rate on our property. But whenever I call, they keep asking me about my husband's credit information, because I'm not working on my dad is retired. So why is it they're targeting because my husband is working?
That's just, you have a house, and you're trying to refinance the loan on that house? You have debt on it?
Yeah, we still have that. We're still paying mortgage.
Right.
I just would like to lower the interest rate.
So you have to, I mean, this is a little off the topic, but I can tell you there's something called HARP. I don't know what the acronym means, but the HARP loan, interestingly, it's to help people in a situation exactly like you, and they don't even look at anything. They'll just ask you, are you working? But your father must have Social Security, any benefits? So they'll look at that, and they won't even do an appraisal, and they're supposed to just give you the lower rate. And interestingly, I got 2 HARP loans, and I don't even live in the houses, and everybody I talk to seems to have the same problem. And it's just, knowledge is power, young lady. That's all I can tell you, and I know what I'm doing, and you have to be able to know. First, you have to find out if you're eligible, and then you have to be like a bulldog. Okay? Good luck. If you have any questions later, I'll talk to you. Yes? Cash. She asked what is the alternative to a credit card. Cash. No, there's something called a debit card. I was just kidding. I like to call, my wife is Johnny Cash, I call her. Just give me 1 second. I'll be right with you. So a debit card is like if you have $100 in the bank, you have this card and you can utilize up to that amount. And, you know, I have a son in college and he has that. And the only time I hear from him is when he needs more money. I think somebody had a question over there. Absolutely. Credit increase, lower your score.
And also, if you haven't paid off your credit card, if you haven't used it for a long period of time, meaning that you're inactive, does that affect your credit?
No. Doesn't hurt you if you don't use it. I would just say to you, they look for activity isn't bad. I'm very fortunate, and you got me going now. My wife uses the credit cards quite often, so my credit's great. Because we pay off the debts. I just have a lot of tears in my eyes. Next, anybody else? Yeah.
Credit freeze versus
Well, the credit alert is a fraud alert. It's a very good question, Vicki. I'm going to go pull up the credit report again and just show you. No. What is the difference between a credit freeze and a credit alert? I just have to go to the very beginning, and I wanted to. You see this thing right here called Safe Scan Alert? Safe Scan Alert? That means that was run through a safe scan to make sure that this person is real, and they have ways of checking. And that this tells me they looked, well, this was only a borrower. The B stands for borrower, and the C would be co-borrower. So I can tell who the culprit is on each item if it's two people on it. I'll say if it's the co-borrower, it's the second person, the borrower. But this says the borrower has everything. Your inquiry, I'm sorry it didn't come through, gone through our Safe Scan database. So that's a form of a check. But the alert is put on. Let's say somebody took identity theft on a person. You contact the credit bureaus and you tell them there's a fraud alert on I want a fraud alert. And anybody who does anything, I want a letter. And usually, let's say somebody stole all information and you were one of the people's information that was stolen. Usually, the company will pay for you to get a credit alert for 1 or 2 years, so that if anybody compromises your Social Security or personal information that may have been stolen, you will get notification on it. That's the alert. You get a letter or an email. Somebody ran your credit yesterday. Somebody did this. Or did you just open a Macy's credit card? And you didn't. The credit freeze, I know when we freeze, nobody can use that credit card anymore. So if I put a freeze, if I know one card was stolen, I had a personal situation, a very good thief. They didn't steal my whole wallet. They just took one card out of the wallet. And so, you know, I didn't know anything was wrong. Then I get a call. It was American Express. It was on a Sunday. I was at a gym. And I don't know, I guess I didn't lock up. Smart, right? But I did it. And they said, we noticed that you never shop in a supermarket with your American Express card. And you just bought $400 worth of food. So I went to my wallet. I opened I said, no, somebody took my card. So that's when they froze the card and they said, you won't get charged for that thing, but that's a freeze. So that's what I understand it as. Yes?
Can you freeze your credit report?
Freeze your credit report? No. You can freeze a credit one line. So if you have a Visa card that you feel is compromised by somebody, you can contact Visa and say, look, I want to freeze the card, or I think something's wrong, I want a new card. Like, they'll close it down and send you another one. But you can't if anybody's running and you didn't say there's an identity theft or a stop.
I was a identity theft victim, so they had to freeze up my credit report.
So they closed everything down because they got everything. So then you have to start over.
Yeah, it's annoying.
I just want to say American Express has a service. I know you're all young people, but that you can give them all your information, and if you say I was robbed, they will contact everybody for you. I'm not saying to do that, but it is something to do. Okay, got a lot of questions here. I apologize. Yeah.
Does your credit score lower every time you open a credit card?
No. Opening a card is not lower. If you use it and you don't pay, that's a problem. It's okay to open it. But I'm not a fan. This is a constant argument with my wife and I. I'm not a fan. I like to have two cards. Like I'll have a Visa card and an American Express. And I really don't want a lot of cards because that means I have less exposure. But when I look at her, I said, oh my God, you have a credit card for everything. I mean, wow, it's amazing. I met Mr. Bernanke must love you, I said, because she's helping the economy. She says, look, I got a lot to do. She never tells me how much she spends. It's a very good account. She always tells me percentages. She says, I got 40% off. I said, but you went to Saks. Go to Macy's and pay full price, and maybe we'll be even. So I never know amounts. I never, all the years. We're happily married. You got to keep me happy. I'm a freakazoid. I get a little excited. She wants to put an Italian flag outside when she's Irish. Yes, young lady.
Does your credit report actually eventually reset, or does delinquencies remain for the rest of your life?
Well, the question was, does your credit report reset? It will stay there forever, but after a year, if you were delinquent on one item, after 12 months, it kind of becomes a non-issue. Even to the lenders, 1 year is kind of you paid your debt, your karmic debt for your sin. Yes?
So back to the inquiry, they say on your credit report?
The inquiries, again, it's for a time frame. A year, I would say, would be the fair time. But no, it doesn't stay forever, credit inquiries. You won't see 5 years ago they ran your credit. You had a question?
Yes. How important is it to provide your personal information on your credit?
Very important. It mean where you live and stuff? Yeah.
You know how they have your current address, and then they have your previous address or your current employment?
Well, if it's wrong, you should communicate with them. And you should look who's reporting that, because you'll see on the far right, right, who is the person, and you go to transunion.com and get a phone number. I like talking to somebody, but that's just old school. Let's get some people. I mean, I'm answering questions over here. Anybody in the back? Yeah. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. How do you build? The question is, if you don't have a credit card, how do you build up your credit report? Thank you. Phone bill. Anything that you prove, if you paid your insurance on time, car insurance, if you had a car, or if you pay your rent, the landlord letter, a utility bill, cell phone, if you have that. Anybody that you have business, a debtor-creditor relationship, you get a letter from them, that could be used. But the other way is to open a credit card and occasionally use it once. Yeah. Paying it on the due date is okay. No, it's on time. In other words, the question is, if you pay the bill on the last day you can, it's not a problem at all. That's called playing the float. Banks do that. They wait till the last day to pay the money.
In response to our question, don't banks now offer what's called secure credit cards, where you're paying the bank a certain amount of money first, and they're giving you a credit card that reports to the credit agencies?
Honestly, I don't know, but it sounds to me something that would be very possible. They have secure credit. Yeah.
If I may, the answer is they do. For people that may have trouble with credit, you can apply to some banks and some credit card companies, and you can get a secured credit card. And what that is you would make a deposit, say $300 or $500, and they would give you that limit or something less than that. So it's secured because if for some reason you don't pay the obligation, they're holding your money. And that is a way to build up credit, perhaps if you never had credit and you cannot establish credit, or if you've had problems in the past. And if you maintain a good record over time, then they will perhaps gradually refund part of the deposit, and then even gradually over time increase the credit limit. It probably varies from company to company, but I would say at least a year, at least a year.
To reestablish credit. Thank you, Professor Rosen. Okay, I'm going to anybody else that has questions, I'm available after Professor Rosen speaks to share any insights I may have. And I think it's best at this point to let my, would you?
Good afternoon. Professor Merola is a tough act to follow. I don't have the wife jokes, but I'm just going to point to him. And he'll give us another joke when appropriate.
But those are true stories. I'm living it.
It's, as Professor Merola said, obviously your credit score, your credit report is very important. And you have to actively work to make sure that you have a good credit score and a good credit report. And I'm not going to say that's hard. I think it requires vigilance, that you have to be mindful of what you're doing and also what may be happening to you. Now, luckily, in this process, you have many legal rights and protections. So you're not here in this process unguarded. And what I'm going to do is, over the next 7 hours, talk about Just want to see who's paying attention. I'm going to talk about some of the most important laws, primarily federal laws in this area, and there are quite a number. And these laws are here, basically, as I say, to protect you as the debtor, as a person who is seeking credit, somebody who has credit outstanding. We're going to touch upon the Consumer Credit Protection Act of 1969, which is an umbrella law that includes various subsidiary acts, some of which you may have heard of: Truth in Lending, Equal Credit Opportunity, the Fair Credit Billing Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I'm going to also talk about something much more recent, the Credit Card Act of 2009, sometimes referred to as CARD, C-A-R-D. We're going to touch upon the Dodd-Frank law. No discussion of credit would be complete without some brief mention of bankruptcy. We debated whether or not we would talk about it, but I think prudence says that we should touch upon it. And finally, we'll touch upon the topic of identity theft. Let's begin with the Truth in Lending Act. Back in 1969, this was passed. And this applies to what's called open-end credit lines, which are revolving charge cards and home equity loans. An open-end credit line is a credit line where you can draw down credit, make a payment, and then again draw down credit, as opposed to what's called a closed-end credit line, which would be a typical home mortgage where you're borrowing a certain amount and you're gradually paying it off, or a car loan where you're borrowing a certain amount and you're gradually paying it off. And basically, this law is designed to make sure that you, as the borrower, have information. So with respect to the open-end credit lines, there are various disclosures that have to be made before the actual loan is made. And then there are disclosures that have to be made on the monthly statements. Primarily, they have to disclose clearly to you all of the interest rates and all of the fees that you are going to be charged. And without going into it in excessive detail, it's very important for you as somebody who's taking out credit, whether it's a mortgage for a house, or a car loan, or a credit card, understand the terms, understand the charges and fees that you're going to be responsible for. And this has to be provided to you by the creditor. And it has to be provided in disclosure statements. And if you don't understand it, sit down with somebody who can explain it to you. Doesn't necessarily have to be an accountant or a lawyer, but it probably is a good idea not to sit down only with the person who is trying to sell you the loan. Go to somebody that you trust that can explain these terms to you so that you have a clear understanding. Now, under this law, cardholders must be given 15 days notice of changes in terms, and some of that has been changed by the more recent law, which we'll talk about in a minute. The issuance of a credit card is prohibited under this law unless it's in response to a written application or an oral application, or if it's a card renewal. So if for some reason you open your mail one day and you get a credit card and you didn't apply for it, it's not a renewal of an existing card, right away that tells you there's a problem, because they're not allowed to issue a credit card to you unless you applied, or unless it's a renewal of an old card. Very importantly, there's a limit of $50 maximum that a card holder must pay for the unauthorized use of a credit card. So, as the professor said, in his experience, his card was missing and someone ran up charges of $400. Obviously, as soon as you find out that somebody stole your card or perhaps your number, and there may be an unauthorized use, you have to report it to the credit card company. But this law protects you. You're only liable for $50 for unauthorized uses before it's reported. Once it's reported, presumably the account will be frozen or closed. With respect to closed-end credit, which would typically be a mortgage loan or a car loan, again, the key word here is that the disclosures must be clear and conspicuous. The disclosures really being the terms of the loan, most importantly what the fees are, what the interest rate charges are, and whatever other fees there may be associated with the loan. As Professor Morello will say, I'm sure, if you go to buy a home, you know, the lawyers will say, you know, make sure you come to the closing with your checkbook and be prepared to sign a number of checks because there are a lot of fees and expenses associated with that. And under federal law, you're entitled to get this disclosure. And it must be in a form that you can keep and that you can read prior to the loan closing. That's very important because if you're sitting at the loan closing, it is somewhat of a pressured moment. Even if you're sitting there, in the case of buying a home with a lawyer, you know, there's a lot of papers going back and forth, a lot of things you're signing, and this is not the time to read these documents for the first time. And I'm not necessarily, you know, really focusing on the legal documents, which if you have a lawyer in the case of a home mortgage, you know, they should read and explain to you. But before the closing, you should understand the financial terms, most importantly, the charges, the fees, the interest rates. Now, if the disclosure is set forth in a contract, which it can be, it must be clearly indicated, either in a box, so it's very clear, or in boldface, so that it's very easy to read and to understand. Let's move on to the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1979. In very brief terms, this basically prohibits discrimination in lending. It is against the law, it's against federal law, and I believe also New York State law, for would-be creditors to discriminate against applicants for credit based upon such things as sex, race, color, national origin, age, marital status, religion, or because a would-be borrower has income that comes from public assistance. They're not allowed to discriminate based upon these types of factors. Now, a creditor may not discount or refuse to consider income in deciding whether or not to issue a loan to you if the income comes from retirement benefits or part-time employment or alimony or child support. They cannot refuse to consider that income together with other income that you may have. Also, a creditor cannot deny you income because in the past there's an indication that you disputed a charge on your credit card, or perhaps you disputed something on your credit report, and now you're applying sometime later for a new loan, and the new lender, the would-be lender, sees, well, 6 months ago, a year ago, you got into a dispute with your prior credit card company. They're not allowed to use that as a basis to deny you a loan. They must also give you a written explanation when your application is denied, or if they take any other types of adverse actions, such as lowering your credit available to you. They must give you a written explanation, and this explanation, this notice, must give you the reasons why your application was denied or why there was some type of adverse action taken. Questions so far? Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Yes?
I heard you say that the $50 maximum on the credit card use is unauthorized.
Yes.
Is that the same for debit cards?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I'm not sure that the same law applies. I would say that is governed by your deposit agreement with the bank, because that's not credit. That would be my offhand answer. Because the laws I'm referring to deal with credit. A debit transaction is not a credit transaction. You're actually taking money out of your account. So I would, in the first instance, I would check with the bank. I would look at the customer agreement that you sign when you open up your checking account. Okay, the next law I want to touch upon is the Fair Credit Billing Act of 1975. And again, this applies only to open-end credit. Now, this is billing. This is when you get your monthly credit card statement. or from the bank that has issued you a car loan. This is in regard to disputes or problems that may arise with respect to the charges that you're receiving on a monthly basis. Obviously, you have to look at your statements. Very, very important. In a related context, I've done arbitrations in the securities industry for many years where individuals have claims against brokerage firms. And I can tell you that I've been an arbitrator in many cases where a customer is suing a broker for allegedly doing something wrong with their account. And the question always comes up, well, how come it took you 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years to find out? The customer says, well, and the next question is, did you open your statements? And I've actually been in cases where the records are subpoenaed, the customer comes in with all of his statements in envelopes, still sealed. So these laws are here to protect you, but you have to protect yourself. And the first line of defense is when you get a statement every month, look at it and make sure you understand everything that's on there. Now, if you get a monthly statement from your credit card company and there's a problem, you must give them written notice of that error, that alleged error, and you must do that within 60 days of receiving the bill. So you should not wait. You should get that out to them. It has to be in writing. The creditor, the bank, the credit card company, must respond to you within 30 days. These are time limits that are specified in the federal law. They must then resolve the dispute within 2 billing cycles, or no more than 90 days. Now, when I say resolve the dispute, it doesn't mean they have to agree with you. They can come back and they can say that the charge is correct, or they can say that it was in error and correct the error. Either one is a resolution, but that must be done within 90 days. And they have to explain the reason for their resolution. During this period of time, during this resolution period, no collection activity is permitted on the disputed item, and no finance charges may be collected on this item. So if there's a charge on there that you are disputing, they cannot charge you finance charges on this during this presumably 90-day period or less. Also, the account may not be reported as delinquent during this period, may not be closed, it may not be restricted because of this charge. If there are other problems, if you're not paying other charges, of course they can close it, they can restrict it. But they cannot close or restrict the account because of the disputed item during this period of time. Now, after the 90-day period is up and they've come back to you and they've said, we've looked at it and we believe the charge is correct, and then you still believe that it's wrong, you still can dispute it further. You write them another letter, and during this period, they may not report the account as being delinquent to the credit reporting services, unless they also, at the same time, report that the particular charge is being disputed. So they can report it as being delinquent, but they must also say that it's in dispute. And the creditor must report, again, how the matter was resolved after the second round of investigation. Now, a related act, this was the Fair Credit Billing Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act of 1971, deals with your interaction with the credit reporting bureaus. Creditors are to notify customers of the name and address of the credit reporting agencies whose reports were used as a basis for adverse credit decisions. So if you apply for a loan and the loan is denied, they have to indicate to you, which credit reporting agency, the name and address of that agency they used as a basis for denial. As you may know, many, many people in the years leading up to the recession, during the recession, many people had a lot of problems with credit card debt. And this was a serious problem. And President Obama pushed for reform in this area. and law was passed in 2009, and this is the Credit Card Act of 2009. And under this act, there are various federal regulations that became effective over the next 18 months or so, some in 2009, some in 2010, and some later in 2010. And this law really has made some very fundamental changes in the way credit cards are issued, the way the bills are presented, the way credit cards are advertised. And this is something that's very important for you to know. And most of these laws were passed, again, most of the provisions of this law, I should say, were passed for the protection of the customer, the person like yourself who is applying for or who has a credit card. First of all, let's talk about raising interest on existing balances. As Professor Murillo said, best way to handle a credit card is to, if you incur charges, pay it off. Pay it off when you get the bill, the first bill. Unfortunately, not everybody does that. Sometimes people cannot do it for whatever reason. That's not really the best way to handle it. But if you have an existing balance, can the card company raise the interest charge on that? And under this law, 2009, they can only raise the balance, the interest rate on the existing balance, only under certain circumstances. First of all, if the interest rate was a promotional rate. Sometimes when you sign up for a credit card, there's what's called a teaser rate or an introductory rate. It'll be a very low rate. Again, you got to go back. When you're signing up for the card, read the fine print. You know, maybe they're talking about a credit card that carries a rate of 7.5%, 8%. But in the fine print, they'll say, well, after 6 months, the rate goes up to 18, 19, 20, even more percent. You should know that. Well, suppose you have a credit card and you have an existing balance, and the question is, can they raise the rate? Well, yes, they can if it's a promotional rate. After the promotion is over, they can raise it on the existing balance. If it's a variable rate credit card, they can raise the rate. What does that mean? What is a variable rate credit card? Up or down? Right, the interest rate is not a fixed amount, not a fixed rate, but it will go up and down. It's tied to a peg rate. It might be the bank's prime rate. What's that? What does that mean, bank's prime rate? That's the rate of interest that banks will lend out money to their best customers, their ideally best suited customers. And that, of course, is a fairly low rate. And many times customers will have a variable interest rate, which is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points, whatever it is, above the prime rate. So if there's a variable rate being charged, then it's certainly true that they can, increase or decrease the rate as the credit card agreement provides. Also, they can raise the rate on existing balances if you make a late payment. And that's something that's very common today. Very important, as Professor Murillo said, make your payments on time. Because if you do not make your payments on time, that can serve to increase your rate to a so-called default rate. And you could have maybe a 13, 14% interest rate, and all of a sudden you missed a payment, and now the rate on your existing balance jumps to as high as 28%, 29%. Very high. Under the new law, under the 2009 law, they can increase rates on new purchases only after the first year. Again, excluding if it's a promotional rate. But if you get a card with a fixed rate and it's, say, 14% or 15%, that has to be good for 1 year. After 1 year, they can raise the rate on new purchases. Any changes, significant changes in the terms of the agreement require that you get notice, and you must be given 45 days notice of the changes in the credit card agreement. They also made very basic changes in what was called universal default. Does anybody know what that referred to? Suppose you had a credit card and you were making your payments, and suppose you carried a balance, carried a $1,500 a month balance. Again, not something you want to do, but you did it. Suppose you missed your telephone company bill, and you were 30 days, 60 days late on paying telephone company. Well, what happened before this law went into effect, if that was reported by the telephone company and your credit card company picked it up, that could be the basis for raising your rate, your interest rate. So now, based upon the fact that you were late in paying your telephone bill, the interest rate on your credit card jumped from 13, 14% to 28%. That's what's referred to as universal default. Now, this may not be done under the new law for existing balances. Okay, so if you have an outstanding balance, you're paying your credit card on time, but you miss another payment, another credit card, telephone bill, car payment, that cannot be the basis for raising your rate on the existing balance. It may, however, be used for future purchases. So that can serve as the new rate for future purchases going forward. Under the new law, you have the right to opt out. Okay, now this means that if they come out with changes in the credit card terms, whether it's interest, whether it's some requirement as a payment, time periods, you have the right to opt out, to reject those changes, and they have to honor that, and they have to give you at least 5 years to pay off any existing balance. Now, a big problem under the laws and regulations that existed before this law was passed was credit card marketing to young people. Yes? Sorry?
Which is the name of the law?
This is the Credit Card Act of 2009. The acronym is CARD. There's a card, accountability, responsibility, something. But it's the Credit Card Act of 2009. The big problem before this law was passed was marketing of credit cards to young people, particularly on college campuses. Banks and credit card companies actively went after young people under the age of 21, college students. And they would tie it to promotions, free food, pizza. Sign up for a credit card, get free pizza, get a sweatshirt, get a present, get a prize. When you take an 18-year-old kid, or a 19-year-old kid, or a 20-year-old kid who's never been living on his own before, say, at a residential school, or somebody at a commuter school who's never had access to $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 in credit line, it's very attractive. All of a sudden they have a credit card, they can go out and spend $2,000. Of course, you know, I'm sure you may have heard this expression before. Young people do not always make the best decisions. When they do that before, all of a sudden now the young person who took out the credit card ran up $1,000, $1,500 in charges, why he's not working. Or has a part-time job, he's making $100 a week part-time. The bills come in, and you can't pay it. A lot of young people got into trouble. Well, now this law is sought to correct that. Nobody under the age of 21 can now get a credit card without one of two things. A parent or guardian has to co-sign, or they have to be able to show proof that they have the income to be able to pay off whatever balance there may be on that credit card. Credit card companies now have to stay at least 1,000 feet away from college campuses. If they're recruiting by giving out free things, pizza and other prizes. I'm going to be very curious to see when their cases come down and people start suing, because credit card companies are found to be within 800 feet, and not 1,000 feet, which will be very interesting to see this. Also under this law, federal law now requires that you have at least 21 days to pay the bill. Not always a monthly bill, you get 30 days, depending on the cycles and how it's done. Under this law, you must have at least 21 days to pay off the balance. They cannot set arbitrary time deadlines. Sometimes the due date, somebody asks about making payments on the due date. Suppose the due date was the 15th of the month. So you know that you had to be paid in by the 15th of the month, but you never realized in the small print it said by 12 noon on the 15th. Your payment came in, was opened up in the mail at 3 o'clock, or you called it in or used the internet. That would be late. Now they cannot set those arbitrary time deadlines. They cannot be a time deadline before 5 p.m. Sometimes people have a balance, a composite balance. They may have bought things on a credit card, they may owe $1,000. They may have taken out a cash advance. They may owe $500. They may have transferred a balance to another credit card. And there may be different interest rates associated with these balances. Typically, cash advances carry a very high interest rate, probably 20% or higher. Purchases might be 12%, 13%. Credit card companies in the past were free to take the payment that came in and apply it to the lowest outstanding, to the balance that carried the lowest rate. So unless you paid off the entire bill, you were still getting charged at the highest rate on whatever that balance was. Under the new law, if you pay more than the minimum can be applied, I guess, to the lowest rate, but anything that comes in beyond the minimum amount must be applied to the highest rate first. They have limited, over-limit fees. You have to basically opt in to get over-limit protection. Very typically, before this law was passed, a lot of credit cards offered over-limit protection. If you had a $3,000 credit line and you were at that limit, say you were at $2,900 and you incurred a $200 charge, many times they would let the charge go through. So now you owe $3,100, you're over your limit, and you would get a very hefty charge, $35, maybe $50 over-limit charge. Now you cannot do that unless you affirmatively opt in to get that over-limit protection. So they'll call it over-limit protection. If you don't opt in, you don't have it, you won't get the charge. The charge will be declined. So if you have $2,900 outstanding with a $3,000 limit and you're in a store and you buy something for $200, it will be rejected. But you won't be subject to that charge. Change with respect to computing finance charges. There was a practice where they computed finance charges on outstanding balances, even if you paid off the prior balance. In some cases, they went back to the prior period and on new charges, and you would in effect be paying interest on new charges beyond the actual time of the charge. That was prevented under the new law. Now, sometimes people with bad credit, we talked before about the secured credit card. Sometimes people with bad credit or troubled credit can get secured cards or other types of cards, but they have to pay a fee. They have to pay a fee. And there were programs that were available to people where they get, say, a $1,000 credit limit on a new credit card, but after they got the card, they realized that $200, $300 went for fees and was taken out of the card. So as soon as you got the card, you owe $200, $300. The new law prohibits that to no more than 25%, I should say limits that to no more than 25% of the balance, of the available credit line. So now, if you are in that category, it's you have bad credit, poor credit, and there's going to be upfront charges. If you get a $1,000 credit line, those upfront charges cannot be more than 25% or $250. On the credit card statements, they must tell you how long it will tell you it will take you to pay off, how long it will take to pay off the balance. Okay, and how long it will take to pay off the balance if you're paying the minimum. So if you're carrying a balance, again, this is something you should not do. You're carrying a $4,000 balance, you would be astounded to know, by paying the minimum, how long it would take to pay that off in years. And this is something that previously was not disclosed. But now, if you have a balance on the monthly statement, it has to indicate to you how many years it would take to pay off that balance if you only pay the minimum each month. Also, they have to tell you how much you have to pay each month if you want to pay it off over 3 years. So now on credit card statements, there's a box and give you both types of information. That's mandated. That's mandated information that must be provided. Late fees are now capped at $25 if you're occasionally late. But if you are late more than once in a 6-month period, that can be raised. But if there's an occasional lateness, which is something you really do not want to do, the late fee would be capped at $25. The new law also deals with gift cards. Gift cards cannot expire before 5 years. There are so-called dormancy fees with gift cards, meaning if you have a gift card and you do not use it, there are fees associated with that. Really is the reduction of the principal amount of the gift card. And those are now limited to where the card is not used for 12 months or more. And with respect to gift cards, there's a limitation that they only charge you 1 fee per month. There's no limit on the amount of fees, but they can only charge you 1 fee per month. Now, it's also important to note that this new law doesn't cover everything. This is a consumer law. This deals with credit cards issued to consumers, to people. It doesn't cover corporate accounts, it doesn't cover business accounts. There's no cap in terms of how high interest rates can go. So there's no maximum amount. And rates on future purchases, as I mentioned, can be raised. Variable rates of interest are allowed and they can be increased. Credit card companies can close accounts and reduce credit limit fees without advance warning, except in cases where there's a dispute, as we discussed before. And new fees may be imposed by the bank. Since this credit card law went into effect, we have seen some real creativity on the part of banks in coming out with new fees. A much publicized attempt by Bank of America several months ago. Half a year ago, they were going to charge people for using their debit card ATMs, and that lasted about 2 weeks. And they got a tremendous negative reaction from their customers, so they changed that. But banks are losing money because of some of these provisions. So they are looking to make it up in new fees. Anyway, in terms of time. Okay, a few minutes. Just briefly, Fair Debt Collections Act, for those people that run into trouble, and now your account is with a debt collector. Debt collectors, people cannot call up and threaten you. You cannot use abusive language. It's very tough federal law. People have recovered substantial amounts against collection agencies that do not comply with federal law. All sorts of requirements. They can only call you between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. They're not allowed to contact you at work. If they know that your boss doesn't allow it, they know that it's not convenient. I just want to touch upon 2 other substantive areas, and then we have the film to show. The Dodd-Frank law, you may be familiar with that. That was a law that was passed in 2010 to regulate some of the abuses that happened in Wall Street before the recession. And some say help create the economic problems that we were in. Very importantly for each of us, the Dodd-Frank law, the Dodd-Frank Act, sets up a Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. And this is still being worked out. The regulations are in the process of being drafted. But this is like a super federal government agency that's basically there to protect consumers financial matters. So people with mortgage problems, people with credit card problems, student loan problems, bank, credit cards, car loans. This is an agency that we can submit complaints to, and this is here to basically help you as a consumer. Finally, let me just touch upon bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is the last resort. It's not something to be entered into lightly. Sometimes people got in trouble, young people got in trouble financially, and they were very quick to run into a bankruptcy. The effects of bankruptcy can be long lasting. It stays on your credit report for up to 10 years. All right? Having a bankruptcy will impact your ability to obtain credit. It'll impact your ability to buy a home. It'll impact your ability to get insurance. It will, in many cases, impact your ability to get a job. Many times, prospective employers will run a credit report, and if it shows that you have a bankruptcy, you know, we have laws against discrimination for various prohibited categories, race, religion, etc. But there's no law that says you cannot discriminate against somebody, not hire them because they have bankruptcy. There are two provisions, two chapters that are of interest to individuals. Chapter 13, which is basically a reorganization plan for wage owners, wage earners, where you try to reorganize and come up with a plan to use future income to pay off debts. The other type of bankruptcy, Chapter 7, straight bankruptcy, is what we call liquidation, where basically your assets that are non-exempt, various types of assets that are exempt, are collected by a trustee, sold off, and that money is used to pay creditors as far as possible. Avoid scams. There are a lot of scams out there. There are companies that will advertise to pay you credit. There are companies that will advertise to give you a loan. Be very, very cautious when it comes to companies that are charging you upfront money. I would be very surprised to find any company that charges you upfront money to get a loan or to fix your credit problem. I'd be very surprised if that's legitimate. Be very careful. Any company that tells you they're going to guarantee a loan, be very, very careful. There are, as I said, a lot of scams. Sometimes when they talk about solving credit problems, they're really talking about bankruptcy. And you don't really know it's about bankruptcy because we get further along in the process. So I would be very mindful of that. The last point we want to touch upon, and I know you have a future program, but we're just going to touch upon it briefly on the subject of identity theft. Let me ask you this, hypothetical question. You're sitting at home, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You get a phone call. You pick up the phone. The person on the phone says, hello, is this so-and-so? You say your name. You say, yes. Well, my name is John Smith. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Juries in Queens County. You were supposed to report for jury duty this morning at 9 o'clock, and you didn't show up. We are in the process of issuing an arrest warrant for you. So what? What? I never knew I was supposed to be there. Well, wait a second. You sound like a nice person. Maybe we can resolve this over the phone. I'll see what I can do. I can speak to my superiors. I need some information. Please give me your name, your address, your telephone number, your age, your social security number. How many people would give that information? Okay, you heard this talk before. This is a real scam. I was serving jury duty 3 years ago in Nassau County, and the commissioner came out and said, look, these calls are taking place today. We, the jury commissioner's offices, we don't make calls. If you don't show up, we'll send you something in writing. The point here is you never, ever give out your social security number unless you know that the person to whom you're giving it is legitimate. And all I need is your social security number, and I can wreak havoc on you. I can go out and open up a credit card with a false address, and I can run up $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in charges. You're never going to know about it. Forget about going into your existing accounts, you may find out about it. You're going to know about it 5 years later when you apply for a mortgage and you get the credit report and you find out there's a judgment against you at some address in Brooklyn that you never even heard of. And now you're in the process of trying to correct that. Identity theft is a real problem, and you have to make sure that you protect yourself. At this point, we have a brief video from the Federal Trade Commission, which is going to play.
Somebody took it away from me in the blink of an eye. In less than a month, this woman destroyed what I had worked for 15 years.
I mean, your credit score is basically all you have.
I was mugged, they got my information.
It can really negatively affect your life.
Then they went off with the information and basically became me.
I feel it's a loss of control that someone's out there pretending to be you and doing things in your name that can come back to haunt you.
Somebody was using my name and all my personal data.
They'd done it all. I just didn't even know where to start. They had a long record.
It's a terrible feeling.
Identity theft. It happens when your personal information is stolen and used without your knowledge. It's a serious crime that can cost you time and money, ruin your credit, and destroy your good name.
When I was a victim of identity theft, my mail had been stolen.
I was shopping at a grocery store and someone took my wallet.
I think I made a purchase and they stole all my debit card information.
My briefcase had been tampered with, and when I looked in it, I saw that my passport and my driver's license, which I had in there, had been taken.
Identity theft happens when someone takes information about you and then uses it to commit fraud.
Identity theft is very serious.
We know that identity fraud in its various forms has affected 10 million people in any given year. And what that means in dollars is that it's a loss to businesses of about $50 billion. On top of that, victims of identity theft have spent $5 billion trying to undo this harm. Everyone needs to be conscious that identity theft is real.
When you get news that your identity has been potentially stolen, it's sort of this open-ended problem that has occurred, and you don't know what's going to come of it.
No one's immune, which isn't to say that we're powerless. There's a lot we can do to deter, detect, and defend ourselves. My identity was stolen when I was mugged. It is pretty traumatic, especially how it happened to me. They got my information and it happened. Then they went off with the information and basically became me when they went to charging items in stores.
Identity thieves can only take advantage of you if you give them information or if they obtain information about you. So what you want to do is take steps to make it less likely that your information falls into the wrong hands. There are many ways that you can do that. And the first is to stop and look in your wallet. What are you carrying around? And if you lose your wallet, are you giving somebody else an opportunity to commit identity theft? So avoid carrying around any identification that has your social security number on it in your wallet, because that can be used very easily and efficiently by identity thieves.
They could have your name, they could have your birth date, but if they don't have your social security number, they're not going to get very far. But all they really need is a social security number, and they can misspell your name and still get credit.
The only place that social security card number should be is in your head and protected somewhere at home where you keep your other valuables.
And if someone asks you to provide a social security number, ask them why they need it, how they're going to keep it, how they're going to safeguard it, because you don't want that number to fall into the wrong hands.
I had an incident that I thought was a valid reason to give out information until they asked for my social security number. I went as far as the first 3 digits. I thought, gee, they don't need that. And then I hung up.
This is a crime. You have to think when you're at home, protect your identity. Don't leave around your personal documents, your date of birth. Somebody could come into your home and have immediate access to that information.
You also have to be careful about your trash. Now, a lot of people routinely receive things in the mail, maybe bank statements, credit card statements, or health insurance forms, and if they don't need them, they just throw them away in the trash. They shouldn't do that. Everyone should invest in a shredder. So before they dispose of these critical documents, you shred them. Identity thieves, don't worry about getting their hands dirty. They will go through your trash to retrieve these documents. They go where the information is. They'll steal your mail, they will steal your trash, they'll steal your wallet, and that's how they get information about you.
Deter identity theft. Protect your social security number. Shred financial documents and paperwork with any personal information before you throw them out. Never give out personal information on the phone or internet unless you know who you are dealing with.
My name is Nicole M. Robinson. The woman who stole my identity, her name is Nicole A. Robinson. She stole my information from the pharmaceutical company that she works for. After this happened, it devastated my financial life. I ordered my credit reports, and I received a credit report in the mail that was 54 pages long. It had over 170 accounts. 140 of them were in collections. It had 42 different names and 65 different addresses on it. Not only was somebody else reaping the benefits of my good credit, I could no longer have access to my own good credit. And I cried. I cried every day for 3 months.
On top of the financial and the time that people spend in resolving these issues, it's an emotional burden on victims.
My life before the identity theft case was wonderful. In less than a month, this woman destroyed what I had worked for 15 years. She got my life.
If an identity thief uses, for example, your Social Security number and applies for new credit in your name, as opposed to raiding an existing account, there may be no way for you to know about it unless you've checked your credit report and you see that a new account that you didn't even know about has been opened in your name. That's why it's very important to monitor your credit report regularly.
Detect identity theft. Check your credit report at annualcreditreport.com. Federal law gives you the right to a free credit report every year from the 3 national consumer reporting companies. Review your financial accounts regularly. Look for charges you did not make.
When someone realizes that they're a victim of identity theft, it's like getting a kick in the gut. You know, you feel paralyzed for a moment. But it's really essential for victims to move quickly and deliberately in starting to resolve the problems that arise from identity theft.
I did what everybody knows to do, and that's call your credit card companies and cancel your credit cards. However, that's not enough. There was one major bit of information I did not have, and that was to call the 3 major credit bureaus. And I did not do that, and what happened was this person then went back. She was able to reopen the credit cards that I canceled. She was also able to open new credit cards in my name.
If you find you've become a victim of identity theft, the first thing you need to do is contact one of the 3 major credit reporting agencies and have them put a fraud alert on your file.
You got to take it seriously. You even suspect it, you got to put fraud alerts on. You got to take the steps to protect yourself, and you got to inform yourself about what to do so that when it does happen to you, you can do it quickly because time is critical.
You next want to contact each of the creditors or other institutions where your information has been misused. Then you follow up in writing and dispute these accounts and get a letter from them resolving these disputed fraudulent accounts.
The FTC has an affidavit, which in my case I used, to write out your explanation of what happened that you can then use to submit to creditors trying to collect on fraudulent accounts. When you're trying to tell them, look, my identity was stolen, it helps prove it to them.
You next want to contact your local police department, report the crime, and get a copy of the police report.
You should contact the police immediately because otherwise you have no proof that there was a crime.
It's very important that you report it to the police because there are certain agencies that you need or we recommend that you contact, and they're probably going to refer you back to the police department to see if you have a police report or not.
And finally, you need to contact the Federal Trade Commission online at ftc.gov/ID theft or call us toll-free at 877-ID theft to report this to us.
Defend against identity theft. Call the 3 credit reporting companies and place a fraud alert on your credit report. Then ask for the free credit report you're entitled to. Close any accounts that you suspect have been tampered with or opened fraudulently. Start by calling the security or fraud department of each company. Follow up in writing and include copies of supporting documents. File a police report. Contact the FTC. Your information also helps law enforcement officials across the country to track down and stop ID thieves.
Let's treat our personal information as we would our cash. Let's safeguard it, whether we're at home, whether it's in our purse or our wallet, or at our office.
Your personal information is cash, and in the wrong hands, it can destroy your life.
The FTC plays a central role in helping victims avoid and recover from identity theft. So we have developed substantial consumer education material that's available on our website at ftc.gov/ID theft.
Identity theft is serious, but even if your identity has been stolen and there has been, fraudulent accounts open in your name, you can defend yourself and get those resolved in your favor.
There are times when you just do not want to finish and you just want to say, you know, forget it, I can't do this anymore. But you have to find that way inside of you to just keep going, because this is something that if you don't clear, it definitely affects the rest of your life.
What I want is for us to create a culture of security for our personal information so that this crime in the future will be diminished greatly.
Okay, thank you. I think we're just about out of time. If anybody has any questions, by all means come up and ask us.
Yeah, I just want to remind you, we're actually going to have a representative from the Federal Trade Commission to elaborate more on identity theft. And we have the flyers here on the table, so just grab one. And that lecture will be in April 25th. Okay, so I urge you to come. Excellent. We had 12 years ago.